back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. This week's case was suggested by listener Emily Spencer. She wanted me to cover the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart, aka the Scream Murder. I've heard this one covered on a few other podcasts, and every time I'm left so confused. This was such a senseless murder. Even the killers have no explanation for why they did it. Cassie was their friend. They just simply had to kill, and she gave them the perfect opportunity to do so. Cassie Jo was born December 21st, 1989. She grew up in Pocatello, Idaho. Pocatello is a relatively large city, at least to my standards. People who live there think it's more of a small town, but with a population just over 87,000, it is way bigger than the town I grew up in. The most recent census shows 874 people. Shout out New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I wasn't able to find much background on Cassie leading up to the night of her death. I know that she was a middle child, having both a brother and a sister. She spent a lot of her childhood living with her grandparents. Cassie was a very responsible young adult who did well in school. She had a passion for drawing and playing music. She was kind-hearted and made friends with just about anyone. In September of 2006, Cassie was hired by her aunt and uncle to house sit and take care of their pets while they went out of town. This was easy money for her. What teenager wouldn't love having a place to themselves for the weekend and just loving on some puppy dogs? Cassie didn't go as far as throwing a party, but she did have a few friends over. That Friday night, her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, arrived around 6 p.m. After a while, Matt invited their friend Torey Adamcik to come hang out. Torey showed up with another friend, Brian Draper. Both boys were 16 years old, and all four of the teens attended Pocatello High School together. Cassie gave everyone the grand tour of her aunt and uncle's house, including the basement. They settled into the living room and put on Kill Bill Volume 2. Not long into the movie, Torey and Brian decided they were going to head out and watch a movie at the theater instead. Cassie and Matt continued Kill Bill on the couch. About 15 minutes after Torey and Brian left, the couple heard glass breaking and strange sounds coming from the basement. Then, all of a sudden, the power went out. Without a flashlight or a candle nearby, they were left in pure darkness. The dogs in the home kept barking and growling at something from the top of the basement stairs. And I am such a wuss. I would totally be gathering all the pets and running out the door. I do not investigate strange noises. Cassie and Matt didn't investigate either. They just sat on the couch and waited it out. After a short while, the lights came back on. Cassie was feeling a bit uncomfortable about the power outage. Matt called his mom and asked permission to stay the night there with Cassie so she wouldn't be alone. Matt's mom didn't think that was a good idea. They were only 16 years old after all. But she did offer for Cassie to come stay at their house and sleep on the couch. She would feel better if there was an adult in the house to supervise. Even though Cassie was pretty spooked, she wanted to stay. She promised to care for the animals, and the arrangement was for her to stay overnight. Around 10:30 p.m., Matt was picked up by his mom. Then he called Torey to see what he was up to. Torey answered his call, but he was difficult to understand. Matt assumed he was whispering because they were in the movie theater. But in reality, Torey and Brian were in the basement. Earlier that evening, when Cassie gave them the tour, they unlocked the basement door so that they could re-enter later. Instead of driving to the theater, they just drove down the street and changed into new clothes, all black, including gloves and a mask. And I don't know if they actually wore ghost face. Sources just say a painted mask. Scream, however, was an inspiration for what they were about to do. They entered the home via the basement door. They intentionally made noise in an attempt to lure Cassie and Matt downstairs. They planned to sneak up on them like characters in the movie Scream. When the noise didn't get her attention, they flipped the breaker. Torey and Brian assumed when the power went out, Cassie and Matt would come down looking for the breaker box. But they didn't. They just sat together in the living room until Torey and Brian gave up and turned the lights back on. Later, when Matt called Torey, they realized that Cassie was now home alone. They turned off the power again. but Cassie didn't budge. She tried her hardest to stay calm. She laid on the couch and tried to get some sleep. Eventually, Torey and Brian made their way up the stairs. They opened and slammed a closet door to scare Cassie. Both boys were armed with knives they bought at a pawn shop. Torey held a hunting knife and Brian's was more like a dagger. Torey was the first one to stab Cassie. He hit her neck and she fell to the ground. Together, they attacked Cassie, stabbing her 30 times. 12 of these 30 stab wounds were considered to be fatal. They left Cassie alone to bleed out. And guys, this part is hard to digest. It's really disturbing to hear. Torey and Brian had been planning multiple murders. Cassie Jo Stoddart was just one person on their kill list. The boys considered themselves filmmakers and videotaped everything, including stages of planning, the murder itself, and their reaction immediately after. This is a clip from video footage leading up to the murder and then fleeing the scene.
There should be no law against killing people. I know it's a wrong thing, but hell, you restrict somebody from it, they're gonna want it more.
We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah. I was 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I locked the back doors. That's all locked. Now we're just gonna wait. I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappeared. Dude, I killed Cassie. Fuck. That felt like fucking real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the fuck up. We gotta get our act straight.
Okay.
Sad as it may be, we have to kill our friend. It makes me horny just thinking about it. What the hell is wrong with these kids? They idolized serial killers like Ted Bundy, the Hillside Strangler, and the Zodiac Killer. Along with the videotapes, they had a written manifest similar to the gunman at Columbine, another event that inspired them to go on a killing spree. I'm not sure if Cassie's parents or guardians just let her have the weekend to herself and didn't check in, but her body wasn't found until 2 days later, when her aunt and uncle returned from their trip. Her 13-year-old cousin is the one who entered the home first and found her. I can see maybe not talking to her mom in 2 days, but I was a teenage girl once, and I doubt an hour goes by without at least texting your boyfriend. Especially because when Matt left that night, he knew she was freaked out. Then you don't talk for 2 days? He did apparently try to call her on Saturday, but she never answered. But the truth is, Matt was nearly a victim himself. Torey and Brian were planning to kill Cassie, and Matt would be collateral damage. He just happened to leave before it went down. But police didn't know that. Matt was their number one person of interest. He was the boyfriend and the last person to see her alive. Matt's mother confirmed that she picked him up around 10:30 Friday night and took him back home. He agreed to a polygraph test, which he passed. His alibi cleared him as a suspect due to her time of death. He told police that Torey and Brian were also there that night. During Brian's interview, he told police that they thought it was going to be a party, but when they got there and realized it was just going to be the four of them, he and Torey left. They drove to the movie theater and then stayed the night at Torey's house. Torey's story matched what Brian told police, and he denied any involvement. After killing Cassie, they did purchase movie tickets to create an alibi. But when investigators asked details about the movie they claimed to see, neither of them had answers. Literally, they knew nothing about it. If that's your alibi, you should be a little more prepared. Other classmates from Pocatello High School were interviewed. Investigators were looking for clues as to why someone would want to hurt Cassie. When they asked about Torey and Brian, classmates said the boys filmed everything. even while at school. They were both obsessed with horror films and serial killers. They often bragged about how they could kill someone and get away with it. Investigators could tell Brian was the weaker link and continued to press him. He eventually broke down and confessed. Well, kind of. According to Brian, he thought they were just going to scare Cassie, but then Torey lunged in and stabbed her in the neck. He admitted that he was there when it happened, but Torey was the one who stabbed Cassie. Then they drove to Torey's house and grabbed a blue plastic bag. They put the murder weapons along with the clothing and masks inside. They took the bag, some rubbing alcohol, and matches to a canyon where they lit it on fire. Then they returned to Torey's house and put on a movie, like nothing ever happened. In fact, the next day, Matt hung out with Torey. Not a hint of remorse for what he did. When Matt mentioned he couldn't get a hold of Cassie, Torey downplayed it and said, "Don't worry about it. I'm sure she's fine." The crazy part is, if Matt didn't leave when he did, they would have killed him too. Of course, once Brian confessed, Torey turned the blame on him, saying Brian did the stabbing and he was innocent. But there was one crucial piece of evidence that they failed to burn: the video of them planning, committing, and confessing to the murder. Both boys were charged with premeditated first-degree murder. They had separate trials, and at the age of 16, both were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Not only that, but an additional 30 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder. They had a list of people they wanted to kill, and Cassie was not their first attempted murder. Something always went wrong, and then they abandoned the plan. Torey and Brian are both serving at the Idaho State Correctional Institution, which I find interesting because I always thought they separated criminals who committed crimes together. Since their sentencing, the law has changed where a minor cannot receive life without parole, no matter the crime. Both boys have filed appeals, but have been denied. Hope it stays that way. Brian feels remorse for what he did. During a recent interview, he spoke about his regret and apologized to Cassie's family. Torey, on the other hand, he is taking the dumb teenager route. He can't be held accountable for his actions because he was only 16. And this was his defense in trial as well. At the age of 16, the brain is not fully developed, therefore affected his decision-making. I don't disagree with that statement, but those are decisions like staying up all night long playing video games when you have an 8 a.m. biology test you didn't study for, not the decision to plan a killing spree and stab your friend to death. That's just evil. Torey's parents fully support him and believe he is innocent. You can't do just whatever you want and get away with it because you're a minor. These boys understood right from wrong, and they knew this would be hurting more than just Cassie, which is why they apologized on camera to her family before going into the basement. You do the adult crime, you do the adult time. Cassie's aunt and uncle couldn't bear living in the house where their niece was brutally murdered. They immediately put it up for sale in 2006. They weren't even asking what the home was actually worth. They listed it for what they owed on the mortgage and not a penny more. Even at $138,000, the house sat on the market for 9 years. And that is the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. I have some reviews to read today. Apple user Jor seemed to have left her review in response to last week's episode. I was bummed because I didn't have anything new to read. She said, "Hey girl, I wanted to give you a shout out. I really love how she keeps it to the story, and you can tell by her reactions that she really cares about the cases. Can't wait for more." Another 5 stars from Kyle. That's Kyle with a C. "I'm from El Dorado, Arkansas. I'm completely in love with the way you present these stories. Some of them I've heard by other hosts, but I listen to them again because I enjoy the way you tell them. I'm a truck driver, and your stories keep me company as I make my daily drive. So thank you for your stories." I'm glad I can keep you entertained, Kyle. Remember a few weeks back, I read a not-so-good review? It was from Apple user Chris Just Jake, who said, "Gross mouth noises, back up from the mic. Other podcasts don't have this issue, but with this one, I can't stand her mouth noises. Otherwise, pretty decent podcast. Drink some water." Then I said, "Well, at least they gave me 3 stars." Well, Chris Jess Jake decided to remedy that. An updated review. 1 star. Her voice is slow and annoying, and the nasty mouth noises are horrible. Drink water. How can you not hear it? It's every single episode. I can't listen because of this. All I can say is thanks for listening to every episode, even though you hate the podcast. Appreciate the downloads. For real, though, I want to thank all of my listeners who return each week, whether you truly love it or suffer through my mouth noises just to get a true crime fix. I appreciate you. Continue sending those story suggestions to KillerStoriesPodcast@gmail.com. I have something lined up for Season 8 finale, but filling slots for next season. I'm spending a week in Pennsylvania and hope to do some camping with my family this summer. I will probably take about 4 weeks off before returning with Season 9. Follow me on social media. I'm at Killer Stories Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and on Twitter at Killer Stories PC. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.